Hey everybody, Cyrilda Summers McGee here with Workplace Change, and we are celebrating Black History Month today. Actually, all month long we've been celebrating Black History Month, and we've specifically been focused on allyship, right? Like, what does it mean to be a true ally to the cause, especially for historically underrepresented people in the workplace? Remember, we're Workplace Change. And for today's final installation about allyship during Black History Month 2022, we're exploring a real life case study. I even have some notes here with me so I can make sure I get the names right, okay? We're gonna be talking about the Rooney Rule. It was created 22 years ago. Basically, the NFL said there was a minimum requirement to have 2 racially diverse applicants for every head coach or coaching leadership role that became open and available. They had to have 2 racial minorities in the queue to be considered for the head coach role. The goal was to diversify the pool, and therefore you're going to diversify the hiring. And I hear this a million times a week in my role, right? Like, you've got to get diversity in the applicant pool in order to get diverse hires. And that's true. If you don't have any diversity in the pool and you hire from that pool, you're not going to have any diversity in the people who actually get the final job. I get it. It makes sense. They set some standards, some quotas, if you will. 2 applicants. Great. Well, in 2022, Mr. Brian Flores, who was the head coach for the Miami Dolphins, was not renewed for the Dolphins. Great. No problem, right? When you go behind the scenes to try to figure out why wasn't he renewed, they said communication challenges, which I'm like, HR hat, I'm interested, because it's the NFL and we are very familiar with there being some aggressive personalities in the coaching staff and on the field for football. So he's got some communications challenges and they didn't re-up. This was particularly interesting because Brian was dope at his job. Brian was moving the dial. He was like one of the most winningest coaches in the Dolphins history. He was kicking butt. So folks said, oh, easy. Brian's gonna get picked up someplace else, right? Well, he was pinged by the New York Jets co-owner to apply for the New York Jets head coaching job. Great. He is an incredible talent. Makes sense. It's a vacancy. Let's put him in the queue. Well, before Brian's interview, he gets a text message from Bill Belichick, basically who said, who's, by the way, the head coach for the Patriots, has been forever and ever and ever, congratulating him on getting the job. The challenge was that he hadn't even interviewed for the job yet. So he responds back to Bill and said, hey, you talking about me or you talking about the other Brian that I heard has applied for this position? And Bill said, my bad. I quote, F this up. Yes, you did, my friend. However, Brian Flores still went through the interview process and he felt humiliated going through this exercise because what he knew was that they had no intentions of hiring him for this job and he was just a quota. They just had to check a few boxes in order to move forward with the hire that they were always going to select from the beginning. A white, cisgender guy. All right, cool. I wanted to use this case study because allyship is the opposite of that. So let me tell you all the ways they got this wrong and how, in a lot of ways, the NFL has been engaging in performative allyship for a very long time. From jump, the NFL knew that it had a problem where 70% of its talent on the field, risking their bodies, risking their health, week after week, season after season, 70% of those players were black men, are black men today. And yet, very few, handful of coaches over the history, 200-year history of the NFL have been black men. Why is that? So they made the Rooney Rule and they say, this is because we want to get more black men from off the, people who've played before to be able to make decisions, be in decision-making positions. Great, incredible. But they really didn't do very much hiring from those pools where they had the required minority representation. Performative allyship. See, performative allyship is pretending to care. Right. Performative allyship is presenting as if you're going to do the right thing and even creating policies to do the right thing, only to ultimately do what you were always going to do from jump, which was to sustain the status quo. Right? But and the reason why it's called performative is because on screen, as the world is moving by, it looks like you care. But when you look at the outcomes, the tangible outcomes, you demonstrate that you never really cared, right? I wanted to use this case because I have worked in government, and in government, people were touting the Rooney Rule as the gold standard of diversity initiatives. And you know what? It's worked out the exact same way that the Rooney Rule has worked out in the NFL. Very little traction as it pertains to hiring historically underrepresented people into leadership roles. Even when we go above and beyond and we jump through all the hoops and we do our best to sell ourselves and demonstrate that we are a palatable historically underrepresented person, we still don't get it, right? Because it's fake. So let me tell you what allyship is really about. Allyship is about reviewing the data to look at the trends, right? And not making excuses for the data, but saying we are smart people, we can do something to change this trend. I saw the head of the NFL in a news conference saying, well, we got to look at the data and figure out what the problem is. You knew there was a problem when 70% of the talent on the field were black men and only 3, 4, 5 ever, 10 maybe, black men ever led an NFL team. You knew there was a problem and you did nothing about it. Allyship is before you get called to task, you are prepared to do something about the data that is right in front of your face. Allyship looks like establishing goals and metrics for progress, right? Set a goal. If you only have 2 black people, right, in a head coach position, say next year, let's find a way to hire. If we've got 50% vacancies for head coaches, 50% of those folks are going to be historically underrepresented. We're going to find the talented people come hell or high water and put them in those roles. Allyship looks like holding accountable detractors, right? The folks who were never going to move forward with any tangible outcomes that were in support of those who were historically underrepresented. We know who they are. We know that these people are not on board with this work, and yet they get to stay in their roles. No, allyship looks like rooting those characters out. And lastly, allyship looks like owning the results of your failed efforts and making a commitment to do better and then publicizing the efforts and the outcomes for years to come. That's what real allyship looks like. Gang, I feel for Brian Flores because I have seen thousands of Brian Floreses work themselves up, dedicate themselves to gaining all the requisite skills to be a competitor in the applicant pool, in the selection process, going in a system that was not designed for them to be successful, putting themselves out there, and ultimately being overlooked because in real life, they never intended to hire them anyway. It was performative. For this Black History Month, I want for you to think about what have you done as an ally? And I'm talking black people, white people, able-bodied people, disabled people, transgender people, cisgender people. I'm talking all people. If you got a seat at a table, if you got access and a voice to power brokers, how are you advocating for those who don't have a seat at the table, who don't have a voice in the room, right? That's the call. That's the call to action right now, is that when you have the opportunity, do the right thing before you get outed, before you get called to task. Just do what you know is in the best interest of those who have historically been disenfranchised, marginalized, and subjugated. That's my call to you. All right? My name is Cyrilda Summers McGee. I want to thank you for listening, and happy Black History Month.